Senator.
Thank you. So there are 11,000 of the 50,000 were randomly selected. Is that how I understand your evidence?
That's correct.
Okay. So who selected the 11,000? That was the independent company?
That's correct.
Okay. And there was some criteria around how to make that selection?
The only request that we had was that we got a representative sample across all sectors.
Okay, so would you be confident in saying that, for example, AOPA there were OAPA members included in the sample?
Yes, I would.
And the Gliding Federation of Australia?
Yes, I would.
And the Sports Aircraft Association of Australia?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so is there any way of working out the distribution of
Yes, that's specified in the report.
So, for example, if one organisation made up 10% of the 50,000 in your database, were your instructions or guidelines to the successful tenderer that 10% of the 11,000 will also come out of that cohort of that association? Was it like that?
That was the plan, Senator, yes.
Okay, so have you got documentation around this? You called for tender,
yes.
You laid it all out, they responded. Can you take on notice to provide us? Now listen,
certainly.
I can again spend 20 minutes, or we can do the A to Z thing, right? Which is
no, I'm trying to be very specific for you, Senator.
Everything about that tender process comes to this committee.
Certainly, more than happy to.
And the date for that, can I have colleagues concur, be the 3rd of December? So concurred, the 3rd of December.
3rd of December, thank you.
And the rationale for the selection, I presume that was in the report.
Sorry, Senator, I missed
and the rationale for the selection of the 11,000, was that in the tender or was that in the report?
That's specified in the report. There's obviously some information there that shows exactly where that comes from.
And did the survey garner the membership of these various organisations for the participants? I know they're anonymous.
No, it did not.
So how can you be sure that there would be members from those organisations I mentioned?
So of the 1,168 respondents that did actually respond, those are broken down into sectors, and there's over 200 of those that were classified themselves as private pilots. There's also some lesser cohorts that identified themselves as self-administering organisations, and a couple of others that have identified themselves as recreational flyers.
So Senator, we don't know who they were, but we asked them to categorise themselves in the response.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go to the licensing arrangements because I am. I know you were in the back of the room. You heard my evidence, my questions and the evidence that was returned. Just in relation to the rationale behind the medical requirements, in that we may have. How did you get the boundaries that you selected? So, for example, controlled airspace, and how does that relate to medical requirements? There's clearly a need for training requirements, additional training requirements. How do you decide that just because you're operating in controlled airspace that suddenly you need a greater medical standard?
Senator, if it's all right, I'll answer that one.
Sure.
It really comes down to it's a risk-based proposition.
I understand, and you heard what I said also. The rhetoric behind that. I'm actually after the next level down to try and understand why you think the risk increases because you go into controlled airspace.
Exactly.
And how?
Now this turns precisely on the likelihood side of the risk equation. The likelihood of a bad outcome from a pilot incapacitation increases dramatically once you enter controlled airspace because there are more aircraft operating within that environment. In addition, controlled airspace is typically around large built-up areas. So I'm talking Bankstown, Camden, Canberra. These are areas that are surrounded by large numbers of built-up areas, unlike somewhere where you might operate on a recreational pilot certificate, like Holbrook, where I used to fly my ultralights, or
is Hoxton Park controlled airspace?
I'd have to pull out my flight planning software to.
Sure.
We're we're out of time, and I've got colleagues who want to put some questions on notice. Senator Patrick, is there some way that you can come to a conclusion?
Well, maybe I can ask for what AOPA says is missing, and that is the safety case or the rationale behind how you made that particular decision. I have an FOI that says you made a decision and sets out some of the circumstances, but maybe you could provide the rationale behind these decisions as to medical licensing, describing what the risks are.
Can I recommend something? All of your people are Canberra-based, Mr. Carmody.
No, sir.
They're not? So who at the table is not Canberra-based? Mr. Sullivan. Everyone else at the table is
I
Canberra-based?
thought you meant all of our...
No.
organisations. Sorry.
This group of people. Senator, why don't we continue this engagement rather than go for questions on notice with all the massive burden of work? Let's just bring our friends back at some time, probably over the next 2 weeks of sittings, where we can find a gap, and we'll continue this because it's significantly important. So are you okay with that? All the colleagues okay with that?
Notwithstanding, I think the information I just asked for would be helpful.
It's a matter for you. It's
I
a
can
matter
answer
for
that
you.
very quickly now, if you like.
Well, and maybe we're about to close because we have estimates following, but could you please spell out how you came to the conclusion that controlled airspace above 10,600 feet, I think you said, or above 690
And we can,
kilos.
Senator. It's the fundamental principles under which our business operates, which is separating passenger traffic.
Sure, but can you just spell that
Absolutely.
out? Spell that
We'll
out.
spell out-
for
we can
me,
spell
that'd
out
be
very
great.
clearly.
Thank you very much.
So that's what we do. Senator.
Thank you.
Chair, can I very quickly on the record?
Sure, of course.
To Mr Carmody and co, in relation to the letter you tabled and who was there at the meeting, I'm not convinced for 1 minute, Mr Carmody, that this is a full endorsement of your work. It even goes in there to saying that the subcommittee, whatever the subcommittee is, didn't agree on everything. So you led me down the path of thinking everyone was holding hands and smothering each other with rose petals. Far from it, Mr Carmody.
Well,
if I may.
Mr. Carmody, are there minutes that would have accompanied this event?
Senator, I'm not sure. But there is the outcome, which is the regulation that has been made, that they all agreed can be made. None of our regulations, Senator, if I may, just to conclude, none of our regulations, when you get them made, have got everything perfect.
You sat there and gave them a backhander with
no,
that
I said they
presentation
agreed.
to lead us down the path that they were full of bulldust.
I said they agreed.
It would assist the committee. Could you please take on notice as to whether there's minutes for the event, and if you could supply them to us before our next engagement. So if that can happen in the next day or two, Mr. Carmody.
Notes which were taken by officials.
A to Z, Mr. Carmody again. So anything that would assist this inquiry to arrive at a determination about the parameters around that decision, and then we can all get excited or otherwise with each other. So I want to thank you.